Thank you so much for joining me today, Mr.
Thank you so
Mohammed.
much, Dr. Thank you for having me.
All right. AMCON was AMCON was actually established by the Act of the National Assembly of Nigeria in July 2010, and that was in response to the 2008 financial crisis with an intended 10-year lifespan. Now, 15 years down the line, will you say it has lived up to its mandate so far?
Yeah, Perpetua, thank you so much for the question, and thank you for having me. Has AMCON really lived up to expectation? If you're looking at the lifespan, you're talking about 10 years lifespan, and what we have now is about 15 years lifespan. So when you look at that and what AMCON really achieved in terms of some of the companies that they have taken over. We have some companies that have been taken over by AMCON, and what we've seen is that those companies end up being worse than where they were when they were not under AMCON. And then when you look at at the moment, there's a trial of the former managing director of AMCON, the kind of corruption that has been ongoing in AMCON also calls for a lot more than it calls for a lot. And again, secondly, when you look at AMCON as a vehicle to drive the economy, it's not supposed to be a permanent vehicle. It's just a vehicle that tries to make sure there's no systemic failure in the financial sector. And after AMCON came into the market, into the economy, we've had banks recapitalized without any issue. The economy is very resilient. So I, for one, doesn't know why we still have AMCON. What you don't know is that bank also pay a certain amount of fee to AMCON, and that's why I agree with what the minister said, that you'll be able to unlock liquidity in the banking sector. So for me, if you ask me if AMCON has really given the desired result, if you're supposed to have a project for 10 years, and after 10 years you are still asking for extension of time, we don't even know how long this will be, then you can't say they've achieved what they set out to achieve.
So, of course, it feels like you're excited about the charge given to AMCON to sort of start a credible time-bound wind down. When we say credible time-bound wind down, how long should we even be looking at?
I think the government, even for me, as far as I'm concerned, they got it all right. All wrong. We are establishing a board. They are telling the board to wind down. I don't know why the board has to be the one to wind down. AMCON is under the Federal Ministry of Finance. Hopefully, I expected the Minister of Finance to set up a committee within his firm, because we are too good at setting up committees. And remember that AMCON also is an act of the National Assembly. So you can't just throw it away like that. So you still have to go through the legislative processes. So if we are really serious that we want to get AMCON off, then we need to do what is right, and we need to do it fast. You can't be saying in one hand you want to get AMCON out, in the other hand you are having a board that is so robust, have representative in every aspect. So I don't think the government is sincere in the wrapping up of AMCON. Quote me, I'm sure this AMCON is going to be there, or maybe until the end of President Bola Tinubu's tenure. And what they will keep telling us is that they are winding up. There's a lot to be done. So for me, I think AMCON has overstayed its stay. So it's something that should have left about 5 years ago. And so if it's not leaving now, for me, it's a big challenge.
You know, it's not only AMCON really that has sort of overstayed its mandate. We have some other agencies like this. But then talk to us, what would be the right way to sort of wind down this particular agency? Because you're talking about the fact that you're winding something down, yet you're also giving mandates about credibility, giving mandates about being the vehicle to drive this and that. How do you marry all of that together? How do you achieve all of these? They look like they're conflicting at the end of the day. So what do you think should be the right way to go about this?
The right way, Perpetua, is to say AMCON is winding down at this day. This is the committee. This is what we are looking for. What asset does AMCON even have? What is the status of AMCON? What is the financial state of AMCON? What is the recovery that AMCON has done? How much of this debt were paid to AMCON? How much of this debt that AMCON been able to realize? How much of overhead costs have AMCON? These are part of what we should be doing towards the rounding up. And rounding up, we should be asking questions, and they will provide. They say this committee is to provide the answer. And after you get the answer, then you know whether this has been a worldly venture. And then you wind down by sending a letter to the president, sending a letter to the National Assembly to say the mandate of AMCON is 10 years. And after 10 years, we have decided that it has come to an end. It has even overstayed its bound. Look, as it stands now, ordinary, constitutionally, if you take AMCON to court, by the act that established AMCON, unless that act of establishment of AMCON had been extended. Now, we didn't know. By the act of establishing AMCON, which was 10 years, after 10 years, anything as regard AMCON is described as illegal. So what the government should be telling is it that they have extended that through the National Assembly? And if they have done that, what is the time frame given to them by the National Assembly? And with that time frame, you begin to wind down. But in winding down, you must answer key questions, some of those questions that I just talked about.
Right. I'm guessing you sort of share the sentiment that AMCON's continued existence and its levies affect banks' financial intermediation role, and that, of course, is given criticism that its contributions alongside NDIC premiums are duplicative and sort of increase operating costs. So from where you stand, what do you make of this? Do you also agree with that sentiment?
I totally agree with it, and I said it, I said what I love about what the minister said is that AMCON, or through the permanent secretary, is that the winding down of AMCON will unlock financial liquidity in the banking sector, and I totally agree. So for me, it will unlock one of the largest financial liquidity in the banking sector. There's a certain percentage of every bank's pay to AMCON, about 0.1% or 1% or thereabout. And so those liquidity can find themselves into the real sector of the economy to develop the economy, rather than finding themselves into the hands of AMCON, which really are not even performing to the optimal level that everybody to perform. Because what you have seen, like you said, the national the NDIC could be able to do that. It's all about recovery of debt, and we have all that happen. I mean, you don't need rocket science for you to recover debt. You go through the court, but again, at the time it was established as a special purpose vehicle. That was the exact word that was used, a special purpose vehicle, because of the financial crisis that we're having, and it was supposed to be for 10 years. That was the mandate. So now the special purpose vehicle has now almost become a permanent vehicle. And not only that, because it's recognized in the Constitution, that means there's a budgetary allocation to AMCON from the Ministry of Finance. There's a lot of questions that are begging for answer. How have AMCON been operating since? Have you been operating by the 1% that is being paid by banks to them? Or how really is AMCON operating? How is AMCON getting its funding? How, in the terms of recovery, when they recover, how much goes to the banks or to the government, and how much goes to AMCON? So there must be clarity on what AMCON have been able to achieve, what it will achieve towards its winding down, and the value that it has brought. But as it stands now, it seems to be these questions are still begging for answers.
Right. So do you see this move having a measurable impact on maybe investor confidence and Nigeria's attractiveness as an investment destination?
I don't know how they talk about investment confidence. Investment confidence as it stands now has to do with FX availability, two-way exchange system, ease of doing business. So I don't see how AMCON has become a vehicle that would drive investors into the Nigeria market. I think if you look at it, AMCON has become almost a vehicle that will steal investment into the Nigerian market, where a corporation that is supposed to operate for 10 years is operating for 15 years. So what do you expect? So I for one, do not think so. That is a vehicle that will drive investment, but to say it's a vehicle that will unlock liquidity in the banking sector that could be transformed into investment, which will have a snowball effect also in bringing investors into the larger economy, I will agree. But it has to come from unlocking of that AMCON, of the winding down of that AMCON, to unlock some of the potentials that the banks are giving to AMCON.
Right. So beyond asset recovery, what broader reforms in Nigeria's financial sector do you think are sort of necessary to prevent the need for another AMCON-like institution in the future? I mean, even after this wind down.
Yeah, Papa, you have to ask yourself, how did we get here? I think it was due to lack of management, especially regulatory management from the regulators at that time. And that regulator was the CBN, no other person than the CBN. I remember that was what even fueled the independence of the feats of the CBN. We at the point when this happened, we questioned the independence. I think what has been the challenge, what have made us to get that vehicle called AMCON was lack of supervision from the regulators. So we need to see more supervision to the regulator, especially in a sector that we have a big impact on the life of every Nigeria. So, but to say we've learned our lesson, I don't think we've learned our lessons through the establishment of AMCON or what he has done. Because if you look at that, then we wouldn't have been getting banks still shut down. After AMCON came in, we've about 3 or 4 banks that have lost their licenses. Even some banks that were there before AMCON came in have not been able to survive. So definitely, there is still, I don't know how to put it, but I think AMCON has overstayed its stay. The only way that we can guide against an ugly incident like this is for the regulators to be on top of their game. Because why we have AMCON was because the regulators were not doing what they ought to do. They were compromised. So once we know we have the right regulator for a $1 trillion economy, then we don't need AMCON. But if you don't have the right regulator for the $1 trillion economy, at the end of the day, it will not only be a nightmare, it will be very, very frustrating for businesses.
We know we have regulators at the moment. Are you passing a message? Are you trying to say you probably do not have confidence in the current regulators as they are?
No, I didn't say that I don't have confidence. I said you were talking about not having future occurrence of such incidents. So I said if we must not have future occurrence in such incident, they also will have to be up in the game. Because if you look at the regulators, especially if I'm looking at a particular regulator that made them to establish AMCON, the Central Bank of Nigeria, you realize that they've been able to regulate the banks, even if we have had failed bank. Even with that, but it's not commensurate to what everybody expected. So what I mean is that regulators have to be up and doing. And in regulating, you don't have to revoke. The world has gone beyond revoking or banking licenses. The world has gone to a point whereby you look for investors to buy those assets, those top-tick assets, and in turn pay taxes to government. I give you an example. Remember the crypto bank in America was bought in UK. It has a branch in UK, but it was bought for $1 just because they don't want it to lose. They don't want any customer or even investors to lose their money. But in the case of Nigeria, once a bank fails, the regulator are only interested in the customer. They don't think about the investor. So those are part of things that need to change if you still want to keep AMCON, you have to make it competitive. And again, as a regulator, you cannot continue to be $1 million regulator in a $1 trillion economy. Our regulator has to up their game and become a $1 trillion regulator. But as it stands now, if you have to do that, there's a lot of training that should be put in place. There's a lot of development structures that needs to be done. But I don't know, or maybe they are doing it behind the scene, but I'm not seeing it yet.
Well, I'm hoping that will not include more levies on the financial institutions. Thank you so much, Muktar Mohammed, CEO Finance with Muktar, for your time on the show today.